You think of the British Empire, you probably picture soldiers in red coats, tea plantations, railways, and the Queen's dominion over far-flung lands. India, Canada, Australia. These names dominate the history books, but hidden behind the empire's headlines are lesser-known stories of forgotten colonies, fierce resistance, and cultural survival. Today, we uncover some of these untold tales. Take Mauritius, a small island in the Indian Ocean, often left out of imperial histories. Captured by the British from the French in 1810, Mauritius became one of the empire's sugar powerhouses. The sugarcane fields were first worked by enslaved Africans, but after slavery was abolished in 1835, the British imported thousands of Indian indentured laborers to keep the plantations running. Conditions were brutal. Many worked under contracts that barely differed from slavery. Yet, despite hardship, these people forged something new, a multi-ethnic society blending African, Indian, Chinese, and European traditions. Today, Mauritius is one of the most diverse nations on Earth, a living legacy of imperial entanglement and cultural survival. On the West African coast, the story of Sierra Leone is just as remarkable. In 1787, British abolitionists and philanthropists, grappling with the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade, founded Freetown, a settlement for freed and rescued enslaved Africans. Former slaves from Britain, America, and the Caribbean were resettled here. Some arrived voluntarily, others under duress. They battled disease, conflict with local communities, and the harsh environment. Yet, through hardship, they created a distinct Creole identity, blending African, European, and Caribbean influences. However, this so-called humanitarian project wasn't free from imperial motives. Freetown became both a symbol of freedom and a base for Britain's expanding influence in West Africa. The freed slaves, often seen by the British as civilized intermediaries, were sometimes used to impose colonial policies on surrounding African societies, leaving a complicated legacy. But the truth tells a different story. From 1788 onward, Aboriginal Australians resisted British invasion in what are now called the Frontier Wars, spanning more than a century. In Australia, official histories long described settlement as peaceful, emphasizing discovery and development. These conflicts saw guerrilla campaigns, ambushes, and fierce defense of indigenous lands. The Wiradjuri Wars, the Black War in Tasmania, and the Kalkadoon Resistance in Queensland were just some of the major struggles. However, colonial records downplayed them as mere incidents or dispersals, hiding the scale of the violence. Only in recent decades have Australians begun to fully acknowledge these conflicts, recognizing them as wars of survival, sovereignty, and cultural endurance. The Caribbean, too, was no passive colony. Beyond its postcard image of beaches and sugar, it was the site of fierce and continuous rebellion. One of the most inspiring stories is that of Nanny of the Maroons, a former enslaved woman who became a guerrilla leader in Jamaica during the early 1700s. She led the Maroons, communities of escaped slaves, in relentless warfare against British forces. Through cunning, strategy, and knowledge of the rugged Blue Mountains, Nanny's forces forced the British into an extraordinary peace treaty, something few colonial powers ever granted to rebel groups. To this day, Nanny is considered a national hero of Jamaica. Her story is a reminder that empire was constantly challenged, and often, those challenges came from the very people it sought to oppress.